Another round of tariffs from the United States.
They need us to survive.
And Canada's premiers are discussing another round of strategies to fight back, this time using energy as a bargaining chip.
It's something that we talk about, absolutely.
We have to go full tilt.
Canada and the U.S. have a highly interconnected energy system. Canadian crude makes up about 62% of all U.S. oil imports, and Canada provides 85% of the electricity imported by the U.S. Quebec, through Hydro-Quebec, is one of Canada's main exporters to our southern U.S., enough to power roughly 1.15 million homes for an entire year.
Canada is quietly making moves that could leave the United States with far more to lose than expected. While the United States prepares for one battle, Canada is holding back its biggest advantage, creating pressure that could become much harder for Washington to handle. Canada is preparing a new round of retaliatory tariffs if trade talks with the United States collapse, and Prime Minister Mark Carney has made clear that every option remains on the table. The provincial premiers have united behind him in a rare show of national solidarity. But the most revealing part of Canada's strategy is not what it is threatening to do, it is what one province is refusing to do. Quebec, holder of Canada's most powerful energy leverage, is deliberately keeping electricity off the table. And the reason exposes how carefully Canada is calculating this fight. The retaliation preparation is real and documented. Ottawa is readying additional tariffs to deploy if negotiations fail, while continuing to stress that a negotiated agreement remains the preferred outcome. Carney has consistently used the phrase, "everything is on the table," to describe Canada's response posture, a deliberately undefined stance that preserves options without committing to specific measures before negotiating window closes. The 50% tariffs Trump signed on July 20th take effect August 19th. The intensified negotiations Carney and Trump agreed to on July 21st are running against that deadline. The provincial unity behind Carney is the foundation that makes any coordinated response possible. Premiers gathered at the Council of the Federation and continued discussions with Carney, presenting a united front as Washington expanded tariffs across Canadian export categories. That solidarity is not automatic. The tariff damage falls unevenly across provinces, with Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia absorbing concentrated hits, while Alberta and Saskatchewan received exemptions on energy, potash, and critical minerals. Maintaining a unified national position across those divergent provincial interests is itself a strategic achievement. The central question hanging over Canada's response has been whether it would use energy as a weapon. The leverage is documented and substantial. Canadian crude accounts for approximately 62% of all U.S. oil imports. Approximately 85% of the electricity imported by the United States comes from Canada. The two countries share one of the most interconnected power grids in the world. Some provincial leaders have suggested energy exports could become part of Canada's retaliation. Ontario Premier Doug Ford explicitly named electricity, potash, and oil as leverage tools, stating Canada could dismantle the US if we wanted to, if we all work together. But Quebec, the province holding the single largest electricity export relationship with the United States, is actively opposing the energy weapons strategy. And Quebec's reasoning is where the real strategic calculation becomes visible. Hydro-Quebec operates major long-term contracts, supplying power to Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York. Those are not spot market arrangements that can be switched off at will. They are binding multi-decade commercial contracts with severe legal liabilities attached to any interruption. A single Hydro-Quebec deal with New York is valued at up to $34 billion US. Disrupting these shipments would trigger major legal penalties and directly harm Hydro-Quebec's bottom line, damaging Canada financially rather than only pressuring the United States. And if you want the real story behind how Canada is still holding its ground through tariffs, wars, and hard times, hit join below to join the membership for exclusive documentaries you won't see anywhere else about Canada's progress and rise through uncertainty. The interdependence runs deeper than the contracts. Quebec relies on importing electricity from New York and New England during winter peak demand periods, or when its own reservoir levels run low. The power grid connection is bidirectional. During cold snaps, when Quebec's electricity demand spikes, or during drought years, when hydroelectric reservoir levels decline, Quebec draws power from the same American states it supplies during normal conditions. An energy confrontation would not be a one-way weapon. It would disrupt a system that Quebecers themselves depend on during the exact periods when electricity reliability matters most. Quebec Premier Christine Frechette has taken a markedly more cautious position than Ontario's Ford as a result. Frechette has indicated a preference for diplomacy, noting that if trade discussions with the United States make progress, Quebec could consider lifting its restrictions on American alcohol imports. That posture, holding the alcohol restriction as a negotiable concession while keeping electricity entirely off the table, reflects a calculated assessment of which leverage tools serve Canada's interests and which would damage Canada as much as the United States. The strategic logic Quebec's position reveals is what makes this a checkmate rather than a blunt escalation. Political analysts and provincial experts emphasize that escalating trade friction with energy tactics could provoke even stronger retaliation from Washington while disrupting a system that benefits both countries. Canada gains more from keeping the energy relationship stable and predictable than from weaponizing it. The threat of energy leverage retains value precisely because it is not used the moment Canada interrupts electricity exports. It converts a reliable revenue stream and a diplomatic asset into a mutual damage scenario with binding legal liabilities on the Canadian side. Instead of an energy conflict, the strategy experts advocate focuses on strengthening Canada internally. Analysts argue Canadian leaders would gain more by expanding interprovincial trade, reducing regulatory barriers for major domestic projects, and continuing diplomatic negotiations than by risking critical utilities or retaliating on small-scale goods. Interprovincial trade barriers within Canada have long been estimated to cost the Canadian economy tens of billions of dollars annually. Removing those internal barriers would strengthen the national economy without triggering any external retaliation, a form of economic self-improvement that compounds Canada's leverage rather than spending it. That internal strengthening approach aligns directly with a major project's agenda Carney's government has been advancing throughout 2026. The Major Projects Office fast-tracking of the West Coast Oil Pipeline, the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 expansion, the Northern Shield Energy Corridor, and the Building Canada Act framework are all mechanisms for reducing regulatory barriers to nation-building infrastructure. Each strengthens Canada's economic independence from the American market without requiring any confrontational measure that invites retaliation. The diversification track reinforces the same strategy. On July 24th, Canada concluded a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with the United Arab Emirates and signed a free trade agreement with Ecuador, 2 trade deals on the same day. Canada has signed 20 strategic trade and defense agreements over the past year. The UAE pledged approximately $70 billion in investment in Canada. Each new market Canada develops reduces the share of its economy exposed to American tariff pressure, strengthening its negotiating position without any escalatory measure. The retaliation preparation remains genuine. If talks fail before August 19th, Canada is ready to deploy additional tariffs building on the existing counter-tariff structure that escalated to $155 billion in covered U.S. goods following the February 2025 measures. Bill C-202 prevents Canadian negotiators from trading away supply management concessions. Provincial alcohol restrictions remain in place, held as negotiable leverage. The counter-tariffs on American steel and aluminum stay in force. Those are the tools Canada is prepared to use.